Hi, friends. My name is Kai Löfgren. I'm the CEO of Regen Melbourne. I'm very sad I can't be with you there in Oslo today. Of course, it would have been wonderful. And I'm also sorry I can't be there live. Unfortunately, I've away with my kids this weekend, and so I couldn't call in it live, but I wouldn't want to miss it. So I'm very grateful to be able to provide a bit of an update on Regen Melbourne to tell you a little bit of a story about our work and also to, I guess, share how we've used the donut economics model, both at a community level and also at a data level, to really inform our vision and our purpose and how to measure progress as we go along. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen to show some photos and illustrations of our work, which I think really help to understand the complexity of what we're doing and our vision. So let me do that here. So Regen Melbourne emerged in 2020 off the back of two simultaneous disruptive crises that we experienced in our part of the world. The first one, of course, was the Black Summer fires. So these were really significant fire events that happened in Australia at the end of 2019 and the start of 2020. And these fires went up and down the east coast of Australia, and they caused massive devastation. They're what we now call mega fires, which basically mean that they're effectively unstoppable in terms of their speed and scale. And in the context of these Black Summer fires, they also created big smoke events that went all the way to Melbourne and Sydney, and the smoke just sat on the cities for a couple of weeks at the start of 2020. And they really gave us a sense of what would the urban experience of the climate emergency look, feel, and smell like. We were very afraid of, for example, taking our asthmatic kids out of the house and making sure that our windows were closed and all these sorts of things that we'd been told about would be a problem with the onset of the climate emergency, but was very much here for us to experience. So that was the first major disruption. The second one was, of course, the outbreak of the COVID lockdowns. And so COVID as a pandemic obviously spread throughout the world. And Melbourne, here's the beautiful city of Melbourne that you can see. Melbourne went into some of the longest lockdowns in the Western world. We were locked down effectively for 70 or 80% of 2020. And those lockdowns were quite severe. And what we experienced in those lockdowns, of course, was that there were existing social fractures in society around wealth inequality, around gender-based violence, around housing, a whole bunch of issues that became really apparent off the back of these lockdowns. They really accentuated these pre-existing social concerns. And so on the one hand, we had the COVID experience, which really played that role of highlighting social concerns in Melbourne. And then we had the Black Summer fires, which really highlighted the nature of our ecological breakdown. And so it was in the context of these twin events that a bunch of organizations got together and started talking about what do these moments mean for Melbourne and what should our vision be collectively as we emerge from these crises. And so a small group of organizations started to gather. And as momentum started to build at the back end of 2020, we went from 5 organizations to 30 organizations who were gathering around these questions of what is the vision for Melbourne. We decided we needed to have a framework or a way of understanding the conversations. And so we turned to the work of donut economics, which of course by that stage had already been downscaled to Amsterdam and a small number of other places. We started to work with Kate Rayworth and her team at the Donut Economics Action Lab to really look at how do you downscale it in the context of a city like Melbourne. And we ran that process for about 6 months. And where I wanted to start with was the sort of the 3 main elements that came out of those conversations, I guess the insights that became very clear for us. And so off the back of those 2 crises that I described, the 3 elements were, the first one is that we obviously live in a meta crisis of interconnected challenges. So there's lots of languages around this, meta crisis and poly crisis, but the language is less important. Rather, it's just important to note that all of the key things that we care about, from health and housing and social equity and political voice and all the elements that we care about, combined with the ecological challenges, means that we're in a cycle at the moment that is amplifying. So all these challenges amplify each other. So that's the first point that we really wanted to highlight. The second one is, of course, once you recognize that we're in a systemic crisis, Single actors don't solve systems problems. We know that to be true. And so that's a really important thing to note when you've got a whole bunch of wonderful entrepreneurs, wonderful social leaders running brilliant projects. Even in a city like Melbourne, which is very progressive and forward-looking, we're still not making significant progress on some of these interconnected challenges. So that's the second point. Single actors don't solve systems problems. And the third point is that the current economic system that we're in is not built for epic collaboration, certainly not the type of collaboration we need to navigate these crises successfully. And that's because our economic system is built on specialization and silos and the demarcation of organizations between the nonprofit and the for-profit and the universities and government, and all these sectors and industries speak different languages and operate at different timescales, and it makes it really difficult for collaboration. So these 3 points are really important for us. This is what we discovered in that early period. So we live in a meta-crisis of interconnected challenges. Single actors don't solve systems problems, and we don't have a system that's built for the type of epic collaboration that we need. So over the last 3 years, Regen Melbourne has become, in answer to these questions, Regen Melbourne has become an engine for ambitious collaboration in service to our city. We've got about 180 Alliance members who are part of our network, and together we host wickedly ambitious projects for Melbourne, things that go well beyond what the status quo activities look like. So that's the overview of where Regen Melbourne is now. But what I want to do is sort of tell you the story of how we got to this place, in light of those challenges that I highlighted. And in order to do that, I have to go back to that research that we did at the beginning. So we turned to donut economics as a way to hold these conversations, as a way to sort of talk about the vision that we had for Melbourne. And after 6 months, we put together a report called Towards a Regenerative Melbourne, which is available on our website. And in this report, we talk about the vision that we've come up with together. So that's what's on the left here, that a regenerative Melbourne is knowledgeable, it's full of life, it's affordable, it's connected through a diversity of cultures, it's deeply collaborative, and also that our economic and political systems enable this vision to come to life. So that's a really beautifully articulated vision for what we want to do. But we also put together a community portrait. So we asked our communities to look at the donut economics model and say what works here and what doesn't work. What would we need to adapt? How do we need to downscale it to our context? And so you can see here that we've got a number of additional elements to the donut that Kate developed a number of years ago. One is this red ring that goes around the donut. We call it the red hug in Melbourne. So it kind of holds the donut together. And it really talks about the importance of healing and reconnecting to nature in order to reach and stay within an ecological ceiling, and healing and reconnecting to each other as human beings in order to bring ourselves above the social foundation. And this just recognizes the obvious reality that, you know, reaching the safe and just space for Melbourne, that green space of the donut, it's not just a technical exercise. It's also a relational exercise. It's a spiritual exercise. It's a psychological exercise to imagine that it's even possible to do this as a community. So at the end of that research project that we did, we had about 50 organizations, about 500 people involved, and we produced this beautiful community portrait of the donut for Melbourne, which really gave us our purpose. You know, our purpose as an alliance is to get into that space. But that didn't provide us an answer of how to get there. And so we went through this process of gathering the community after we released this report. We had parties, we had round tables, we had big corporate, more like formal round tables with lots of businesses. We had community events. We had imagination exercises that you can see on the top right there, listening to the future. Lots of wonderful experiences. And together what we realized is that our value as an alliance was to build a portfolio of wildly ambitious projects. So these are initiatives that no single actor can do on their own. Things like making our major waterway, the river, the swimmable Birrarung project. How do you make that river swimmable again? How do you make it accessible and integrated with the experience of living in this place? So we've got a whole bunch of organizations now exploring this question of how do we do that in real terms over the next 10 years. We've got a project called Participatory Melbourne, which is all about how do you rejuvenate our democratic system. Regen Streets is all about how do you unleash a wave of local regeneration work at a street level across a city of 5.5 million people. And ending food waste is another one that seems like a really obvious starting point when we talk about how do you build a regenerative, resilient food system. We can start with food waste as a nice entry point into that conversation. And then, of course, the last one, which I think is very relevant to this conversation in this panel, is how do you measure what matters? How do you build a sophisticated but also intuitive measurement system to track progress towards the safe and just space of the donut? So if there are our projects, so we've got to start with our vision. Now we've got our project layer. This is the work that Regen Melbourne does. So my little team, the team that works with me at Regen Melbourne, we do a lot of the stuff that is normally unseen. So things like, how do you convene well together? How do you build collective innovation processes? How do you build a sense of active communication and buy-in from our partners? The measurement piece, the policy engagement piece, the funding piece. How do you move capital in service of these goals? So ultimately, all that summarized is our job is to channel the power of our alliance in service of our projects. And in doing so, we can move closer and closer to the safe and just space for Melbourne. And this is what it looks like. This is like the nice, colorful visual. We've got the alliance on the left, we've got our purpose on the right, and these projects through the middle. That's how we channel power and capital and resources of all kinds in service of the work that gets us closer and closer to the safe and just space. And of course, there's always going to be room for more projects. This is not the whole ecosystem of Melbourne. This is just one part of it. And we've got a number of other projects that we're working on at the moment to get to the point where we can really onboard them as tangible pathways to the safe and just space. And I guess the last thing that I just wanted to say with my time is that we are looking at this measurement piece. So we've got this ecosystem of actors, we've got a purpose, we've got these projects, but ultimately it has to add up to tangible systemic progress for the city. And here we've got the first sort of snapshot of the Melbourne data portrait. So this will be released formally as part of the International Donut Day on the 13th of November. So keep an eye out for that. But for now, we've got a prototype going or a sort of a beta version going that we're testing with all of our alliance partners, where we've got different indicators at every single one of the social foundations and the ecological ceiling. And they've been developed in partnership with 5 universities, dozens of academics over an 18-month period of convening and research work. And it's a really good example that the outcome is really important. Obviously, the portrait will be a powerful tool, but the process of getting there is also about onboarding a whole bunch of people to get a really serious level of buy-in, so that when this tool lands, it's genuinely useful to people across sectors, and can become a really powerful measure of progress. And so I guess I just wanted to end. Here's another beautiful photo of Melbourne from a different angle. There you can see the river that we're making swimmable that cuts through the heart of the city. So this is where we started. We started with this idea that these were the 3 things that we were focused on, that we're living in a meta crisis, single actors don't solve systems problems, and our current system just isn't built for collaboration. But I also think if you look at an AI-generated image of a swimmable river, this is our river, the Birrarung, I think that beacon cities really can lead the regeneration here. Cities like Oslo, like Melbourne, like Copenhagen, like Amsterdam, can be sort of frontier cities that are looking at new ways to lead epic regeneration work and then guide other cities to do the same, both in terms of building our social foundations and staying within our planetary boundaries. So that's the first point. The second one is that systemic leadership has to be the next frontier. How do we get leaders from business, from the nonprofit sector, from universities, from government, to take a way more systemic view of how their work is impactful, not just in the first instance, but also in the second, third, and fourth horizons beyond the direct impact of their work? This has to be something that we work on together. What is systemic leadership for a regenerative future? And the last point is that I genuinely think the only way through the crises that we face is through deep collaboration. Regen Melbourne has alliance members from government, from the university sector, from nonprofits, from businesses, from social enterprise, from community groups. And this type of collaboration across sectors and silos is way harder. It's much easier to stay in your own lanes. This is way harder work, but I think it's not only the only way, it's way more fun in the long run. So I'm feeling really wonderful about where we're at with the work with Regen Melbourne, but I also think there's a huge amount of work to do and a huge amount of learning that can take place between cities. And so I'm so grateful to have this time to share with you all the work of Regen Melbourne. And I really look forward to finding other ways of connecting. And I'm always here. You can always reach out to me. My details are on the website. I'd love to chat more and look forward to seeing you all soon. Thanks a lot. Bye.